December 1944. The Ardennes Forest. What began as a desperate German counteroffensive has become one of the bloodiest battles of the Second World War. The Battle of the Bulge. And at the center of that bulge, like a stubborn stone in a frozen river, is the Belgian town of Bastogne. It's a critical crossroads, and holding it is the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. They are cut off, they are surrounded, they are outnumbered 5-1. The Germans have demanded their surrender. The acting commander, General McAuliffe, has given his now legendary reply: "Nuts." It's a response that echoes the defiance of the entire division. But defiance doesn't stop the cold, and it doesn't stop the bleeding. The temperature plummets to 20 below zero. Snow drifts 5 feet high. The sky is a solid, featureless gray, grounding all Allied air support. The men are running out of everything: ammunition, food, winter clothing. But more than anything, they are running out of medical supplies. For the medics of the 101st, the war has become a personal losing battle against frostbite, trench foot, and the horrific shrapnel wounds from the relentless German artillery. One of these medics was technician 5th grade Elias Thorne. Thorne wasn't a warrior. He was the son of a small-town doctor from Ohio. He'd grown up watching his father stitch up farmhands and deliver babies. He joined the army as a conscientious objector, but had volunteered for the paratroopers as a medic. He believed his duty was to heal, not to hate. His men called him Doc. They trusted him with their lives. In his pack, Thorne carried bandages, sulfa powder, and a few syrettes of morphine. But by December 23rd, his pack was almost empty. His hands were raw and stiff from the cold. He hadn't slept in 48 hours. He was stationed in a forward aid post just outside the village, a shattered farmhouse cellar that served as the collection point for Easy Company. The shelling was constant. The sound of the Nebelwerfer, the screaming Mimi, was enough to shatter a man's nerves.
December 23rd. More shelling. Can't move the wounded back. Morale is low, but we are holding. I am trying to hold. There is only so much a man can do. I am out of morphine. I am out of plasma. I told a boy today I could save him. I lied. May God forgive me. The line between life and death in Bastogne was measured in yards. The space between the American foxholes and the German lines, the no man's land, was a frozen graveyard. Anyone who went down in that space stayed down. To try and retrieve them was suicide. The German machine guns in the tree line were ruthlessly efficient. On Christmas Eve, December 24th, something strange happened. The shelling stopped. For the first time in a week, the men of the 101st could hear themselves think. The silence was heavy, oppressive. It felt wrong. Thorne was in his foxhole, trying to warm a frozen canteen of water over a tiny sterno flame. His sergeant, a man named Rizzo, was scanning the tree line with binoculars. "I don't like it, Doc," Rizzo muttered. "They're planning something." And then they heard it. A voice, thin, weak, drifting from the gray emptiness between the lines. It was German. "Help! Please, help me!" Rizzo lowered his binoculars. "Forget it. It's a trap. They pull that all the time. Lure a medic out, shoot him, then shoot the guys who try to save the medic." Thorne just listened. The voice was young. It was desperate. "Sarge, Thorne said, his own voice hoarse. "He's in agony." "He's a Kraut, Doc. He's the enemy. Let him die." Thorne looked at the faces of the men in his foxhole. They were hard, frozen. They'd seen too much. He then looked at his own hands. They were stained with the blood of his friends. He looked at the red cross on his helmet. "He's a man, Sarge," Thorne said quietly. "And he's dying. That's all I see." "Don't be a damn fool, Thorne. You take one step out there, you're dead. That's an order."
Thorne zipped up his medical kit. It was nearly empty, but he had bandages. He had sulfa. He had his hands. "Then I guess you'll have to report me," Thorne said. He grabbed a long, splintered piece of wood from the ruined farmhouse. From his pack, he pulled a GI towel, once white, now a dingy gray. He tied it to the stick. "Cover me," he said, not as a request, as a statement. Rizzo cursed, spitting into the snow. "You magnificent, crazy bastard. You got 30 seconds. After that, I'm blind." Corporal Elias Thorne stood up. He was the only man standing for a mile in any direction. Every rifle, American and German, was now pointed at the red cross on his helmet. He took one step, then another. Thorne didn't flinch. He just kept walking, holding the flag high. He walked past the frozen, shattered husks of pine trees. He walked past the dark, unmoving shapes in the snow that he refused to look at. He was halfway across, 100 yards from his line, 100 yards from theirs. He found the voice. It was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 17. A Hitler Youth kid, pushed into the line. His gray uniform was soaked in blood. His left leg was almost completely severed below the knee, likely by a mortar fragment. The boy's eyes were wide with terror. He tried to reach for his pistol. Thorne shook his head. He spoke in the broken German he'd learned in basic. "Nein, ich bin Sanitator. Medic. I am... help." He dropped to his knees in the snow. The boy was shivering violently, going into shock. Thorne cut away the boy's trouser leg. The wound was catastrophic. He knew, instantly, the boy would lose the leg. The only question was whether he would lose his life. Thorne pulled out his last package of sulfa powder and dusted the wound, trying to stop the infection. He applied a tourniquet, twisting it tight to stop the bleeding. As he worked, he realized he wasn't alone. A German patrol. They were just watching. Their rifles were slung. Thorne locked eyes with one of them, an older man, an officer. Thorne just nodded once and pointed at the red cross on his arm. The German officer nodded back. For one brief, impossible moment on Christmas Eve, in the middle of the most brutal battle in American history, there was no war. There was only a healer, a victim, and the silent witnesses. Thorne finished the bandaging. He pulled a blanket from the German's own kit and wrapped it around him. He gave the boy his own last canteen of water. The boy was fading, but he whispered, "Danke," "Thank you." Thorne stood up. The German patrol began to move forward slowly to retrieve their man. Thorne turned his back on them, the ultimate act of trust, and began the long walk home. He was halfway back. It wasn't the Germans he'd just left. It was artillery, miles away. It was a random shell fired from a battery that knew nothing of the truce in no man's land. The camera is shaky, blurred. Snow and black earth fly everywhere. Thorne is on the ground. The white flag is gone. The truce was over. The shell shattered the silence and the spell.
Immediately, the world erupted. Thorne was trapped. The German patrol had vanished. The Americans in his foxhole were blind, firing at muzzle flashes. He was alone. Again. He low-crawled, pushing his aid kit ahead of him. The snow was his only cover. Bullets snapped over his head, so close he could feel their heat. He wasn't a warrior, but now he had to fight. His fight wasn't with a rifle. It was with the ground. It was with the cold. It was with the 50 yards of frozen earth that separated him from his men. A bullet tore through the fleshy part of his left shoulder. He screamed, rolling into a shallow shell crater. He was hit. He could feel the warm blood soaking his jacket. An unarmed medic, bleeding out in no man's land. He ripped open his jacket. He couldn't reach the wound with his right hand. He was pinned. This, he thought, was the end. But then he heard Sergeant Rizzo's voice screaming his name. "Thorne! Thorne! Crawl! Damn it, crawl!" That voice, it anchored him. He gritted his teeth. He couldn't patch his own wound. He could only move.
He pushed off with his good arm and his legs, dragging his wounded shoulder through the ice. 10 yards, 5 yards. He could see the rim of his foxhole. He could see Rizzo's hand reaching out for him. He lunged, tumbling headfirst over the frozen berm and falling into the arms of his sergeant. They pulled him back. Another medic patched his shoulder. It was a clean through and through. He was lucky. "You," Rizzo said, his voice rough with emotion, "are the craziest, bravest, dumbest bastard I have ever had the honor to serve with." Thorne just looked at his hands, now stained with his own blood and the blood of the German boy. "Was it worth it, Doc?" Rizzo asked. "For one of them?" Elias Thorne was quiet for a long time. The guns started up again. The siege of Bastogne was not over. It would be days before Patton's tanks broke through. "I don't know if it was worth it for him, Sarge," Thorne finally said, "but it was worth it for me." We don't know what happened to the young German soldier. His name is lost to history, like so many millions of others. But Elias Thorne survived the Bulge. He would go on to heal dozens more men before the war ended. He returned to Ohio, took over his father's medical practice, and never spoke of what happened in the snow. The Battle of the Bulge was won by armor, by artillery, and by the unmatched tenacity of the American paratrooper. But in that frozen hell, the war for our own humanity was won by men like Corporal Elias Thorne. Men who, in the face of absolute hatred, chose compassion. Men who saw not a uniform, but a human being. Men who, unarmed, showed more courage than an entire division. The stories of compassion in combat are often the ones left untold. Do you have a family story of an act of kindness or humanity during wartime? Share your hero's story in the comments below.